Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to our session. I'm going to be the chair for the afternoon. I'm Ahmed, NHS doctor and co-founder of Locum's Nest. With us today, we've got a panel of three very esteemed colleagues. We have Debbie Beck, who is a project lead for integration interoperability at Ashton St. Peter's NHS Foundation Trust. We've got Dr. Chris McCullough, who's a former A&E doctor and CEO of RotaGeek. And we've got Nick Andreu, who is also a doctor and fellow co-founder of Locum's Nest. So today we're really going to be talking about all things integration, interoperability, but focusing in on much more about what it looks like in practice, the history of interoperability, why it's important, where we were a few years ago across the NHS as an industry, taking in lessons from other industries, but also where we are today, and how we got there. And it'll be very, very much a Q&A kind of fireside panel where we welcome as many questions as possible. We had an incredible response from the industry and from the event, from people asking questions early on, which I'll try and address to the right people as much as I can. But we welcome any questions along the way from folks in the audience from the NHS, fellow tech suppliers, and anybody really. That's as informal as possible. So really, we want to start with an overview, and integration and interoperability have been at the forefront of the NHS over the past couple of years, and rightly so. And words like APIs, interfaces, etc., thrown around left, right, and centre. But really, what is an API? And if you were to Google it, it'll tell you it's an application programming interface. And if, like me, you like to simplify things, it's basically an interim type of software or program that allows two different systems to speak to one another in a seamless and safe way to make people's lives easier and increase the efficiencies of two systems talking to one another. So we're going to be focusing much on workforce, and really greatly we've got Debbie here from one of the trusts that we work with. But if we take a step back, NHS Digital have been doing a lot of work on setting aside, kind of building a common set of API standards, so a common language that allows systems to talk to one another. And that's incredibly important. And I know this work has just been finalized and it's been going on for a couple of years now, because really what this means is it's not just Locum's Nest, not just RotaGeek, but a lot of other software suppliers out there will build towards a common set of kind of language rules for systems to talk to one another. And it'll just save us a lot of time, but also make the interfaces a lot more robust, a lot more safe. So I'm not going to go into much detail on this, but before we get into the Q&A and I get into questions, I'd like to hand over to Nick to kind of go through a summary video which kind of puts the discussions and the tech interfaces and the code into a visual form, so people can not only hear about the integration of the APIs, but see it more importantly. So Nick, I'll hand over to you, and I'll put myself on mute.
Thank you, Ahmed. So I'm going to share my screen and talk about initially the concept of interoperability in the context of shift sharing, and then show you how it works between RotaGeek and Locum's Nest and Ashford and St. Peter's. I hope you can see my screen. And okay, great. So the concept is simple. Vacant shifts need to travel from RotaGeek to bank Locum's Nest via APIs, and then are broadcast to thousands of users on their apps who see the shifts and apply to work them. After a while, they're approved on both the bank system and the rostering system after being checked for compliance on both, seamlessly populating the information on both systems. So let's have a look at an example roster here. This is RotaGeek, and unfortunately in this example we have a shift that is now vacant due to sickness. So the rota coordinator here marks it as vacant, as you can see, and the shift is automatically generated in the background and also sent to Locum's Nest in real time, as you can see here. The same happens with all other gaps. In this example here, we have 7 vacancies that are automatically pushed to Locum's Nest. They amount to roughly 87 hours of work. So let's go to Locum's Nest. So vacant shifts automatically reach Locum's Nest link through APIs. Locum's Nest link is the interoperability hub, which allows users to control all third-party integrations with Locum's Nest. So here we have, in this example, 37 shifts that are awaiting conversion, and they are automatically filled like so, and any missing details, whatever those might be, are automatically filled in by the bank system. This could be compliance split pay rates, cost center codes, or anything else. And once ready, they're pushed for approval and publication onto the app. So the system now is converting them as we speak. And in this example, we have 37 shifts that have just been published onto the app. You can see it here, where the healthcare professionals, thousands of them, browse through the apps, apply to work the shifts, and once again checked for compliance, they are subsequently approved on both the bank and rostering system. Thank you.
No, well, thanks, Nick. I mean, to me, the things I see there is it just looks very simple and it looks robust, but actually for the end users, everybody gets what they want out of it. And I'll get straight into the questions if that's okay with everybody. And I think out of the 50 or 60 odd questions that we received over the past couple of weeks in the lead up to the event, but probably the most popular one, written in many, many different ways, is just fundamentally, isn't it simpler just to find one system that covers all the bases, rather than relying on multiple integrations, multiple suppliers? What are the benefits of having multiple systems talking to one another? Because, at face value, arguably, it's easier just having one size fits all. And I'll open this to the panel, and please volunteer to go first. But I'm hopeful that everybody has something or a point of view on this.
Absolutely. I can go first if
sure.
Anybody minds. Yeah. So I've been trying to think of an analogy for this, and maybe a week ago I would have used anything else, but recently my washing machine broke. And we all know the washing machine tumble dryer analogy, where the two machines everyone knows are better at washing and drying your clothes than one machine that does both. And there's a clear reason in the context of shifts and not clothes. There's a clear reason behind this. Is because as Locum's Nest, for example, we have perfected the art and science of booking vacant shifts. That's all we do. That's our bread and butter. And we have done that to an almost subatomic level. For example, I wake up in the morning and I have a live dashboard of the activity that happens and how users interact with our apps, making adjustments as we go on the fly to just make sure that those shifts are booked and filled as much as possible. And I know it's the same with RotaGeek. The RotaGeeks are experts in schedule management. So in this case, 1 + 1 really is equals to greater than 2 when you combine a really good rostering system and a really good bank system through APIs.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, to handle that, we work very, very closely together as co-founders. I have never heard that analogy of washing machine and dryer, but yeah, it makes sense. I don't have a dryer, but I get it. The washing machine.
Exactly. Once you do, then you realize the benefit of dryers.
Well, Chris, I'm sorry to skip over, but I think it might be interesting to get Debbie's take on this from the NHS. I mean, Debbie, do you echo the washing machine dryer analogy, or are we kind of way off on this one?
Yes, I don't have a tumble dryer either, but I do agree. So I think what we've kind of been looking into, and obviously just from our experiences with the pilot, where we've been using RotaGeek and Locum's Nest alongside each other, and in the integration, it seems that for me, sort of, you're both experts in what you do. So you want to make your system the best it can be for what you want it to do, which obviously is what would make it the best for what we want to do. So that in a way that's great for us, because you're each focusing on your own areas rather than one, maybe focusing on one area for a minute and then another area for a minute and things, because there's two different groups of people working on the different areas. Then that's been really good, a good experience for us, because we've been able to kind of make changes to things at the same time on both sides. With RotaGeek making changes on things, or Locum's Nest making changes on things, and then working together to bring those things together. And I think the working relationship that we've had between Locum's Nest and RotaGeek has been working as well, because obviously I suppose you need that relationship as well as the relationships that you're to make it work, really.
Yeah, no, Debbie. I mean, I'm also hearing that you've got twice as many problems from where you are to that, and that might be totally fine. Have you found that it's been a kind of a cumbersome, treacle-ridden journey where actually you find yourself firefighting, or kind of could you talk us through the timeline of how things have gone? And Debbie, back to my kind of carrying the session hat. I think when you lean back a little bit, the audio dips slightly. I'm not sure if it's the same with everybody else. But no, yeah. So could you kind of guide us through that and timelines and kind of the smoothness of the process, if smooth at all?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try and lean forward. Sorry if you're getting a close-up of me now. But basically, we went out to sort of tender for the pilot just as the first wave of COVID hit. So we did get delayed a little bit by that, but that was nothing to do with anything apart from the busyness in the NHS at the time. So from when we awarded the pilot, which was I think towards the start of August, and then that was when we started the discussions about discoveries and all of those kind of details, really. The system went live in October, so it was from the start of August to the start of October, so I suppose probably 8 weeks. I know you'd been working on some bits in the background as well, but for us, that's how long it kind of took, really, from deciding to work with you to the systems being used in the department by the team. So we started just a little bit sooner with the rostering, mainly because implementing 2 new changes on the same day probably wouldn't have been great. So we started with the rostering, and then a week later went with the integrated, because we were already using Locum's Nest. So we started with using RotaGeek and then using both together. So probably I think it was about 2 months, 8 weeks, something like that. It was quite a smooth process. We sort of began with the meetings individually to decide, especially because we were implementing RotaGeek to start as a new. So we started with that, and then started to meet with both of you together, so that you, I suppose, could work out what we needed from that integration. And then it was quite helpful because you kind of took it away from us a little bit, because you knew then what we needed, and then I think you did quite a lot in the background to get everything ready. And then once everything was ready, we kind of got back together with you and went through it with that. So that was great. I think probably a learning point from my side of things was to make sure that I had the right people from my side in the room from the beginning. So I don't think we got the rota managers in right away, and I think that would have been more helpful for us, because obviously they know what they want and what they need inside out. So that was just something that I thought was probably a learning for me and for anybody else who's looking at implementing these kinds of systems and integrations as well.
Thank you for that. And yes, the process was smooth, but having had some oversight, I am very aware there were some challenges too. And one really interesting point you made is to get the rota coordinators involved. And we're working with 30, 40, if not 50 trusts now. So, but with most of the conversations, it's usually the rostering team that are leading this, and they're the most involved. How helpful would you say the rota coordinators were in the whole process? Because they're not all road runners typically involved in kind of roster implementations.
Yeah, so I think it's more been for us the complexities of the different rosters. So because we've got all of the different departments, it's not just one size fits all with terms of the rostering, and it's not even different staff groups within departments have different needs. So when we were just saying that's fine, let's kind of get a roster in place and do this, we didn't really think far as in advance that all of the departments would have different complexities and different ways and different things that they wanted to see from the rota. But some of the time it's not necessarily that it's different, it's just that it's the way the terminology that they use and things. So now that we've got a few of the rota managers using things, they're kind of saying, oh, this is what we need, and the other one's saying, well, we're different, we need this. But actually, when you look at it overview, it's actually the same thing. It's just they call it something different, or they view it in a different way.
Thanks, Debbie. And I guess going back to the one-size-fits-all kind of question, which I put right at the beginning, Chris, I'd be really interested to hear kind of your take on this, not just given your experience in healthcare personally and kind of running RotaGeek, but also in other industries, because this can't be a healthcare-specific dilemma of this one-size-fits-all kind of analogy. So, please take the floor and share.
Yeah, and I think Nick's washing machine analogy is quite nice. I might steal that. And I think sort of extending that a little bit, some people will want a washer dryer and some people want a washing machine and a tumble dryer. So, the point of integration is it allows organizations to have an integrated best of breed approach. And what that means is you can pick experts in scheduling and experts in locum management and experts in data processing and experts in blah, blah, blah. And the idea being that providing you've got good integrations and data flow, then you can pick the solution that works for you. And then from a client perspective, it feels like a unified solution, right? And I guess that's why we do what we do. You're obsessive about locum management. I'm obsessive about schedules and shift work. And that's the benefit of it. But that said, there are platforms out there that just do everything. And that's great. And, no disrespect to those platforms, most of whom are huge. But, they do everything quite well. But they're not cutting edge in everything, because you can't be cutting edge in everything. And so I think it then comes down to the organization, say, well, what is it that we want? Do we want to just buy something in that's all right at everything? Great, you can do that. And if that's what you want, it's just a strategic decision. Take that decision and go for that. If you want to be driving innovation and driving, efficiencies and new ways of working and exploring the art of the possible, you probably want to go down an integrated best of breed route. And then I think something that Debbie put quite nicely is it's really important that, and feel this really strongly, that you then took the integration problem off us. That isn't a client problem, that's our problem. And it's really important that, we capture all the information, we map out the data flow, then we fix that, right? And it's really important that integration partners play nicely. And the reason is that integration has got to be seamless. From a client perspective, it's one solution. I don't care that it's two solutions. It's one solution. Make that happen. That's got to be my experience. And I think, that it will be really important at the time that there is a problem, because two platforms and two companies are interfacing. It's really important that you've got that great partnership working to be able to dig into a problem and solve it. Doesn't matter whether it's a RotaGeek problem or a Locum's Nest problem. From a client perspective, it's a problem, let's fix it. And so I think that playing nicely is really key, so that you have this unified experience. I think I guess two quick things and I'll stop. The analogy I guess I have is, you'll see on that demo, that the workflow is that you'll log into RotaGeek and then you'll log into Locum's Nest to manage locum shifts. And it's really analogous to how you use your mobile phone. I was going to say telephone, show my age. But do you know what I mean? Like, I might drive to the station, I'll use Google Maps or Waves. I'll have put my ticket on the train line. When I get to the city, I'll use City Mapper to get around. It's just how, we expect that B2C experience. And it's just being mirrored in the B2B world. I think the area where there is probably a doubling up of effort is in procurement, because necessarily you have two contracts and lots of due diligence and blah, blah, blah. So I think, that's probably a bit more difficult to navigate. So I guess that's my view of the pros and cons, but the key thing is for companies to play nicely, I think.
Yeah, no, I can wholeheartedly agree. And I mean, we've heard analogies in domestic appliances, in other industry, in transport, but why is healthcare behind? Why isn't healthcare the analogy that everyone goes to and says, oh, much like in so-and-so healthcare industry or so-and-so hospital, there's this incredible integration between system A and system B to create this wonderful seamless process. And this is a question for anybody. Feel free to go first, because I've got an opinion on this, but I wouldn't confidently say I know the answer to this.
Do you want me to jump in? Just really quickly, so we schedule for healthcare organizations and enterprise organizations and non-healthcare businesses. And healthcare isn't that behind. And I think that's what's interesting, is a lot of big clients have the same problem. And the key is that you need organizations, you need suppliers that are willing to integrate, and also that can integrate via API, because that's the solution. A lot of just the big companies, because they started on premise, starting to move to the cloud, often don't have APIs, and therefore you're doing flat file transfers, and it's cumbersome and it's a bit more clunky. I think we might touch on this later on, but I think one of the COVID has been challenging in so many ways, but actually what's the way that the NHS has responded globally is, I guess from the outside, from my perspective, like hugely impressive to see the changes in the movement. And I think what we're probably seeing is that the NHS can be more aspirational. And so I don't think the NHS is starting on the back foot, but I suspect they'll catch up much quicker than a lot of big enterprise clients. But I think the challenge will be getting suppliers to work in that way, and therefore I think that centrally setting the standards is a really good start, because then the rules of the game are clear, right? And then suppliers have to abide by those rules.
Yeah, Chris, you're absolutely right. Is it okay if I jump in, Ahmed, and comment on what Chris said? I totally agree with you, Chris, that the NHS, what we're seeing this with the work that NHS Digital has done over the past 2 years, a huge drive towards open standards, well understood. The engagement that went on with all the suppliers has been phenomenal. Those API standards are now published, and I think that's a great start for this industry. I know it's easy for us, as we're all consumers of mobile apps. It's easy for us to compare open banking, which is probably one of the successes of open APIs, to a lesser extent known to us. The aviation industry is always has had some successes there, and the take-home message from what you said, Chris, to me is getting the suppliers to the next step, is to get the suppliers to agree to work together. Otherwise, all that work would have been wasted. And maybe if there's anything to say why this hasn't happened yet, my humble opinion, it could be that traditionally tech suppliers have been a little bit scared of each other. For maybe competitive reasons, maybe any other reason, but I think the whole industry is starting to realize that working together where the customer, in this case our NHS partners, can really benefit the end user. And by the way, the end user isn't a doctor or a rostering manager, it's the patient. And Chris, Ahmed, I'm a clinician as well, and we know, we're acutely aware of what happens when a shift stays vacant. And also we're also acutely aware of the huge benefits when you manage to fill that shift. And I think that's the way forward.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Chris. I think the patient-first focus of rostering is, occasionally forgotten by some. And it is so much more important than just an NHSI requirement. You've really got to believe in it by the sounds of things as to why it needs to be done rather than just the fact that it needs to be done. And I guess, I mean, Debbie, I know Ashton St. Peter's are really, really one of the pioneers in this piece of work across the whole of the NHS. And we're both thankful to be partners with the Trust. But what's the end goal? Where does the Trust want to be with this? Because I know we're rolling out department by department and it's going well, but what's at the end of the rainbow?
So I think what the Trust is kind of the vision is that once we finish the pilot, and actually we're really preparing the tender for a full system, we want something that's kind of agile and lean. And I think since we had so many changes over the last few months.
So sorry to interrupt it. It's got a bit quiet. Sorry.
Is that better? Is it better if I lean forward a little bit?
Ever so slightly.
Okay, I'll try and speak a bit louder. So I think over the last few months, obviously, or even the whole of this year, we've had to make quite a big changes quite quickly. And what we've discovered as a trust is that we need something, either a system or group of systems, which is going to help us to do that. So we need to be able to move staff, move wards, move patients, move anything that we need to move, really. And I'm not just talking about clinical stuff, I'm talking about staff who maybe have to isolate and work from home, or all of those kinds of things. So we're just we feel at the moment, and obviously this could change depending on what we decide in the future, but at the moment working with different companies who are kind of their sort of experts in their particular area gives us a kind of agile, lean system, if it all sort of joins up together, which will help us to do that. That's kind of our plan, really. And also we'd like something that will allow us to have an overview of everything that's going on all the time. So obviously we have rostering systems in place that in all of the departments in the form of spreadsheets and things like that, and people who have like got it in their minds and they know exactly what's going on and where the gaps are and things like that. But then if you need to move people from there to there, and it's two different departments or two different areas or anything like that, there's no agility there. You can't just look at and say, right, we've got gaps here, we need to move people here, we've got loads of people here today, but actually we've got no one over here, let's get everything together and sort of quickly move people around. So I think sort of going forward, it's having that agility to move people and demand to where it needs to be. That's kind of a big thing. And then also the other thing is having like a single source of truth. So if there's changes on a spreadsheet, that has to then be emailed to everybody, and if they don't see the email or what have you, whereas by using an app, if there's a change, it's already there live kind of in people's minds. And the same with like with Locum's Nest, if there's a vacancy that needs to be filled, it's there looking for people to do it, rather than somebody ringing around or however they kind of used to do it. I'm not too sure, but obviously, yeah, so it's kind of just ease of use and ability for everybody in the organisation to see what's going on at any one time.
It sounds like a tech-enabled agile workforce. That's kind of the three words that string along together is the end goal. And you mentioned rostering through Excel spreadsheets, which of course is still rostering. I guess, Nick, you showed the demo, so I'm going to try this to you. Link clearly is a kind of a tech bridge or an API, whatever we want to call it, more than that potentially, that helps, in the industry or the NHS go from Excel to a roster, but also linking the roster to a Locum bank solution. But I'm guessing that wasn't kind of developed overnight or rushed. What was the process of getting it from taking data from a roster to plugging it into a bank platform?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, Link is a product that allows any integrations to be managed by the partners, NHS partners. And the reason we went down the route of having a visible, tangible product is It's quite simple, really. APIs are great. They're real time. Things happen in the background. Information is exchanged in the background. As Debbie said, they help keep a single source of truth between the two systems, so the data is in sync. But because they are invisible, which is one of their main benefits, it can also create a little bit of anxiety to users, because the problem of the need to feel a shift in the context of healthcare is a very, very visible problem. And the hospital needs to know that everything possible is happening right now to fill those vacancies, which is taken care of by a really good API, a really well-designed API. So what we've done with Link is translate that code that happens in the background, the exchange of information, into meaningful English, so that the hospital can access it, see it, read it, understand it, audit it, and action it without feeling at the mercy of this obscure, potentially piece of code. So transparency is key here. When we were working towards developing this, looks like Ahmed has dropped off, but I'll carry on. The other consideration that was we were kind of thinking at the time was that it is our duty as a supplier to take the vision that NHS Digital had forward and champion it, because of what Chris and what Debbie said. We need to give hospitals a choice. And that was the aim of, and still is the aim of NHS Digital. So we didn't just want to say, yes, we're willing to participate in this. We want to champion this vision and signal that we're not only ready, but we're live with it. I think the future of interoperability in the NHS because of that is great.
No, and I think you mentioned NHS Digital, and this has been a long piece of work. I think, you know, it's probably criminal of us not to mention the pandemic and how this all links to COVID. And, you know, maybe perhaps, Chris, given you work across multiple industries, you know, what do you think the pandemic will create in terms of workforce challenges, and how can the NHS best cope using this type of integration, or, you know, this work stream that we're talking about?
Yeah, thank you. So just a thing on Nick's point, just about integrations. I think from a supplier perspective, it's really important that we're comfortable with uncertainty and risk, right? And so what interoperability means is that the client has the ability to, you know, to take out RotaGeek and to put in another scheduling solution. That's great. You know, that choice is good and competition is good. And that's, I think it's just important to highlight that, right? And that's part of the, you know, the risk and benefit of interoperability. You know, interoperability allows us to focus on scheduling. I don't want to do locum management, so lovely to partner with Locum's Nest. But, you know, Locum's Nest will also partner with other scheduling solutions. And if that's right for a client, great. You know, that's what interoperability means. I think it's probably just worth highlighting that. I think the issue of COVID is a really interesting one. So we work with a number of big high street clients, and this is in the public domain, but the likes of Pret and Merlin, who do entertainment venues like Thorpe Park and the London Eye, etc., just been devastated by COVID. And I think the scheduling challenges and the human and people challenges around that are immense. But I think just focusing on, I guess, in any challenging environment, there are difficulties that you need to face into and manage well, and there are also sort of opportunities or lessons that we probably shouldn't miss. And so I think focusing on the NHS, I think the immediate, I guess my immediate thought is, you know, where are the workforce now? So my wife is a doctor. When this all hit in February, I think the NHS sort of had an idea from Italy that this was going to be tough. we sat 3 kids, we sat down and wrote our wills and said, right, what's going to happen if one of us doesn't make it? And I think that was the reality of what health professionals were doing. They were genuinely on the front line. And I think what we, and those healthcare workers have been through the first wave and then a bit of a recovery and then a second wave at the point that they were quite fatigued. And I think the NHS mindset is, we're going to dig in, we can do this, and how do we deliver? I think so the workforce mindset, I guess, is that they've dug in, they've delivered, and they're quite fatigued. I think there's a political aspect to this, that they're now being faced with salary freezes, which is really demoralizing. And so I think you've got a workforce that has given a lot and is fatigued and tired, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But with that in mind, you then look at the operational impact of that, which is, we need to think about people's sort of mental health and their well-being, and how you can use scheduling to contribute to, I guess, their work-life balance and to increase rates of sickness, etc. So I think there are, as with lots of things in life, it's the simple things actually that deliver quite a lot. And I think just from a fatigue perspective, as Debbie said, sort of enabling your team to have their schedule and to have flexibility, the ability to swap shifts, and to I guess we view scheduling as something that sits in the middle of the patient demands and scheduling appropriately for patients, but also sort of work-life balance for staff. Having staff being able to see their rota, being able to swap shifts and have that flexibility and be able to manage that means that the organization has the people that they need, but you're sort of empowering this flexibility and balance in your teams. There's also, we have the ability to, I guess, the sort of smarter technical end, we can create non-fatiguing rotas or minimally fatiguing rotas. We all know that you can have schedules and rotas that meet all the requirements, but that are horrible to work. And that's really important. And I think that will be really important in this recovery period, which is, let's start looking at ways that we can be creative and smarter. And we touched on the point that the NHS has really driven innovation, and some of the stuff has been remarkable. And we probably shouldn't lose some of that. I think in this recovery phase, we may well see staff, pulled in different directions to staff vaccination clinics, or either fatigue, or as vaccinations are rolled out, the need to isolate. And we see this in other industries, is focusing not on minimum staffing levels, but on resilience. How do you create this resilience in a schedule so if someone calls in sick, you've got that ability to cover? And, and that sort of plays into the integration with RotaGeek and Locum's Nest, making it's not fun to try and fill a shift. And and there is a challenge there, and what we want to do with technology is make that as easy as possible so that our clients can make the right decisions for the organization and for their team. And I think that sort of touches on this, that one of the, I guess, the positives or the lessons from the pandemic, which is we've seen huge amounts of innovation, and I think it's really positive for the NHS that we can look at other ways of being a bit more thoughtful about trying different ways of working, as Debbie said, being more agile and testing things in a small controlled way, and really sort of driving that the interface between the art of the possible and the sort of operationally necessary.
So I want to pick you up on one point in particular. So I mean, on a personal level, I'm now working shifts over the weekends, and that's fine. I have total control over that thanks to the technology. But if I rewind a few years ago, I remember the rotas very well back then, and if you're in column C of the rota, you'd end up working, 6 sets of nights in that 4-month rotation. Whereas if you're on column D, because the rota is staggered, you might end up working 4 sets of nights. And that felt unfair at the time, but of course there's nothing you can do about it because that's just the way it was. What do you mean by kind of this fairness faction creating non-fatiguing rosters? Because to me that a roster is a roster. What do you mean by non-fatiguing? It's still the same number of hours. So, if you could have tell us a bit more on that, it's personally quite interesting.
Yes, so I suppose just to take a step back, the example you gave is probably specifically referencing doctors and junior doctors' ways of working with templates, right? And I think we also, the way our nursing colleagues do their off-duty is a bit more flexible, and that you have this sort of off-duty request process. But to Debbie's point, it's often led by really smart people who just own this at the departmental level, and they have this huge knowledge and often have developed solutions in Excel that really work, and those folk are key and are invested in doing this to keep their team happy. And so we sort of implicit in that is this recognition that it's really important. I suppose this is the thing we like about scheduling, is it's mathematically really interesting, but it's from a human perspective really important. So with that, and knowing that we're just looking in this example at sort of junior doctor scheduling with template rotas, but the principles are applicable. I guess for those, I'm sure that with the audience you'll all know, but junior doctors tend to work template rotas. If you've got 10 doctors, you'd have a template roster pattern that has weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you'd all start on one of those weeks, and then you just rotate. Now, the benefits from that at an organizational level of you've got repeatability and predictability. And historically, these were brought in at the New Deal, the Junior Doctors New Deal in 2001. That creates some certainty that meets the sort of the contractual requirements, and the European Working Time Directive, and obviously they interlock. Now, but the cost of that is a lack of flexibility. So from a staff perspective, you can't take leave when you're on nights, etc. But also from a patient perspective, all your scheduling is flat. Now, that might not be the way that the organization works, but those limitations are sort of acceptable in the main for that ability to adhere to the rules. Now, you mentioned two things, fairness and flexibility, I guess. There's no reason why actually you have to work a template rota. Those template rotas are in place because they allow organizations the certainty that rules are met, although we all know in practice, when that's translated into a roster, it flexes a bit. And then the challenge is to make sure that those changes also meet the regulations. And those changes, as you drive them, are more about making sure that your staff have flexibility. In its extreme, there's no reason why you can't say, well, if that template rota shows me how many staff I need on a day shift, a late shift, and a night shift, great. As long as I've got that, and as long as the roster ultimately meets the rules, we have this ability to auto schedule, which matches the organizational requirements and your staff requirements and work preference to make sure that all the rules are met and that you have this flexibility. So in its sort of extreme example, you can have a lot of flexibility for your staff, making sure that you'd organizationally adhere to the rules, manage that corporate risk, but you have the right people in place for your service needs. You can get even smarter and you can say, well, actually, what are our service needs? Because often these template rotas are driven by how many staff that you have. You can forecast your patient needs and much better in a much more granular way match your staffing to that. And so I suppose this is sort of like, this is the art of the possible interfacing with the operational needs of an organization. You can get really smart about it, but often simple wins for clients. The big wins for clients now are the simple things. But this idea actually that you can go on a journey and you can really leverage scheduling to be a great employer, and it's a really easy win, particularly in an organization like the NHS, where people start working for the NHS at 20 and they retire at 65, and their workforce needs will change and their flexibility and stability needs will change. Anyway, so I guess they're my thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'm taking things. And Debbie, this is leading to a question to you, partly from somebody that was in the chat box, but I don't think is in the call anymore. But I guess if we're to say flexibility is the protagonist, the absolute antagonist would be control. But we all acknowledge that control is important, and to varying degrees for various things, to make sure that at the end of the day we build on safe practice. But do you feel that you have enough control of the systems when you're dealing with two entities, for example, Locum Nest and RotaGeek, but do you feel you lose control slightly, or do you feel actually it improves this because you have two layers eventually? I don't know.
So I suppose people would probably say, what if you have a problem and somebody says, oh, that's not our problem, that's their problem, then that would be, you would kind of lose control, because you would then have to struggle to find out where that problem is actually occurring. And I think that's why it's really important that the organisations have a good relationship with each other, so they don't blame each other for problems that are occurring. They work together to find out where that problem is. So we did actually have a thing this morning where we were with the emergency department. We were speaking with our sort of review session with Rota Geek, and the Rota coordinator brought up a thing that she would like to change when the shift shows on Locum's Nest. So we opened up Rota Geek and looked at the shift on there, and then we opened up Locum's Nest and looked at the shift on there. And actually, when we looked at it with our eyes and her eyes together, we realised that the thing that she was asking for you guys to change was actually there. It's just because of the way she was looking at it and the way she was used to looking at it was kind of popping out to her immediately. So I think because there's a good relationship there, kind of just sat quietly and didn't go, oh, well, it's not our fault, you have to go and speak to them. We kind of looked at everything together and managed to solve the problem kind of straight away, which was really, really good. But if the colleague who we were speaking to at Rota Geek had just said, oh, I can't do anything about that, speak to Locum's Nest, then we wouldn't have solved it, and it may have become a bigger issue because it may have gone backwards and forwards. So I think that sort of does bring me back to having a really good relationship between the two suppliers is really important. But the fact that people are wanting to integrate together obviously shows that there is that relationship, I suppose, rather than if you were trying to force people to integrate, or you had two systems that you liked but they hadn't kind of put anything together to say we can integrate with those people, but you were trying to force them to, then that might not be such a great relationship. Does that answer your question? Might have gone off on a tangent.
Absolutely, and I think the time is perfect. Thank you. And I think interoperability goes beyond the technology. You mentioned culture and people wanting to do things. I mean, I am going to give a conversation in St. Peter's. You guys are part of arguably the largest medics collaborative bank in the country, which is phenomenal. And that's trusts integrating with one another and working together. And that, I think you guys created this first collaborative 2.5 years ago, which is well before the movement recently, which is amazing. So a real testament to the trust. My lessons learned story today is being nice costs nothing. Be nice to other tech suppliers. Be nice to other trusts. The N in NHS is national, which implies kind of collective collaborative working. Guys, I'm conscious of people's time. I value the importance of a 5-minute coffee between meetings. We're nearly at the end of the session. Is there anything else that anyone wants to mention before we wrap up? We've answered all the questions I've been sent. So, full marks all around on that front. Yep.
Nothing to add.
Great. Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, no, Debbie, Chris, Nick, thank you very, very much, and thank you HPMA for giving us this slot. Anyone in the audience, thanks for coming. Lots and lots of familiar names, trusts and otherwise. So yeah, please do get in touch through the channels or kind of outside of this. I'm sure everyone's happy to take questions. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Amazing. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Bye.